Assalamu alaikum. Get started. Alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillah nahmadu wa nasta'inuhu wa nastaghfiruhu wa na'udhu billahi min shururi anfusina wa min sayyiati a'malina. Man yahdihillahu fala mudilla lahu wa man yudlil fala hadiya lahu. وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله صلى الله عليه وعلى آله وصحبه وبارك وسلم أما بعد فأعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم من كفر فعليه كفره. Whoever disbelieves, upon him is his disbelief. So for the last few weeks, we've been talking about all of these kinds of issues that exist with human beings, that exist with Muslims and non-Muslims. And I wanted to assure you that, okay, we start talking about repair, about trying to discuss integrated approaches from applied psychology and therapy and Islamic spirituality to try to give people some extra tools or uncover some of the tools that we can use on ourselves, that we can use to help our brothers and sisters, and that we can use to help the larger body of humanity. I always like to start with we're getting people to focus on themselves, because in my experience, if people are not able to focus on cleaning up their own lives, then you know what? Good luck trying to clean up somebody else's. Okay. And I like I said, I know a lot of people really want a kind of salve, social, psychological salve that heals everybody, and in order to even come close to that kind of thing, we've got to be able to deal with ourselves and kind of move out from there. So today we're going to start talking about some of the things that we might recognize in our own selves, some of the things we may not, and then moving beyond that. Okay, inshallah, in the next couple of weeks, because I really also want to be able to present to you some of the things that maybe we've been stepping over when it comes to dealing with humanity at large, especially a lot of the people who have some of the issues that I've discussed over the previous weeks. So again, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, Man kafara fa'alayhi kufrahu. Whoever disbelieves, upon him is his disbelief. The meaning of the three letters kaf, fa, ra signify two meanings in Arabic. The first is to deny, as in to deny the truth, and often in the Quran it will be used in that context. Okay. The other meaning of it is, and this is a lesser meaning, is to cover or to hide. And today I'm talking about both the popular meaning, and to deny or disbelief, and also the uncommon meaning, to cover or to hide. Okay. And that's why I used the part of the ayah from the Quran, Man kafara fa'alayhi kufruhu. Whoever disbelieves, upon his own self, okay, is at disbelief. And that's very, very important for what I'm going to talk about today. Okay. The meaning of kafara, the uncommon translation, often refer to a farmer who would till the land and plant seedlings. Okay, so this was a person who would take a seedling and cover it up. Okay, Um, those people who have, to a degree, been oppressed, who've been abused, use mind-altering chemicals, or who gravitate towards compulsive behaviors, they're also said to be covering up or denying a more pristine reality. One of the major reasons why they cover up or deny that more pristine reality is because of something that we call the false self. Okay? We all have a false self to a degree. It's something that primarily was developed in childhood, and it's used to protect us. In some cases, it's used to protect us in a good way, and in other ways, it's used to protect us in a bad way. Most of us, we know when we're putting on that false self. Okay, the majority of we know that. Okay, we embellished a little bit, or we saved face because maybe there was something we didn't know. We didn't want a particular person to know about us. Okay, or if you're at work, there are certain things that your coworkers may not necessarily need to know about you. Okay, so that's kind of how the false self works. But there are also those who use a false self, and it becomes like compulsive for them. They always do it. It's a pathological issue for them. Okay, and they are unconscious and unaware that they even wear this mask. And they do it a lot, okay? It becomes so well constructed and adapted, it receives so much acceptance from the individual who uses it, as well as the people around the individual who uses it, that it becomes commonplace and the true self is completely hidden, okay? The other thing that's interesting about the false self is that the false self primarily receives what it wants through the very lowest and basest behavior that humanity has. Things like eating, sleeping, copulating, acquiring more material on top of more material on top of more material. That's pretty much how the false self works. The false self is basically interested in piling more crap onto itself, burying the real self deeper and deeper and deeper. Okay? Allah in the Quran, He says, "Have you seen he who takes his own desire as his God?" And it's very, very important because the people who hide their true selves, they in actuality are doing a lot of things that might resemble shirk. Okay, they succumb to all of their desires in one way or another. And again, not only is it the people who have chosen their false self as their real being, but it's also each one of us. We have to always check ourselves to make sure that we don't fall into it. There's a quote that I'll mention to you that's very, very important. It says, "Human life is painful because of desire. We desire things and we chase after them. We are afraid of things and we run away from them. The self can be measured by what it avoids and what it seeks and by its past remembrances." Okay? So human life is painful because of desire. We desire things and we chase after them. We are afraid of things. We run away from them. The self can be measured by what it avoids and what it seeks and by its past remembrances. All of the major schools of psychology and therapy speak of the false self. In some cases, it's referred to as the mask. Very simple. Okay? In other cases, they call it the adapted child. In other cases, yet they refer to it as a public self versus the private self. And you heard me speak about, you go to work, you act one way, or there's certain things that you talk about at work. You have a work personality, and then you have a home personality, or outside of work. Okay. All of these schools of thought agree that the false self's main focus is in chasing away fears like anxieties, abandonment, loneliness, shame, depression, all of those things that I've been talking about over the last few weeks. The pain is largely what the false self is avoiding, always, okay? And it's interesting how it works, because most of the neurotic and pathological behavior that we see in society is primarily a result of the false self trying to avoid emotional pain, emotional suffering. Okay? And I had a colleague one time say, and I really had to seek clarification about it. He said to me, he said that the exacerbation, or in some cases even the beginning of mental illnesses, is the avoidance of things. And I thought, wow, that was kind of harsh. But then when I began to look at more of the clients and check out what was going on with them, I saw it. I saw that there was a major avoidance of painful circumstances in their lives, even trauma. If you know anything, if you've heard it in the news, talking about all of the veterans coming back from Iraq, they've got PTSD. When you get down to the treatment of PTSD, if you go to the Veterans Hospital right over here, you'll see where therapists actually want the soldiers to go back and revisit some of the things that occurred because they can't get through them. Okay? And there is a saying that I really, really like. It says that, in order to get, past the pain, we have to go through it. All right? So then I began to really, really understand what my colleague was saying. There's another part of that that's very important as well, and that is spiritual avoidance brings about that same kind of pain. They are, in this case, one and the same. Okay? So through avoidance, us trying to avoid pain, we actually cause what to ourselves? More pain. Yeah, more pain. Okay? I can tell you that one time I worked with a client who her mom was a drug addict, and she would help her mom shoot up. Okay, and her mom died as a result of that. Okay, imagine being a young female and helping your mom shoot up, and she dies due to that. Well, this particular client was in huge denial. She didn't believe that her mom was dead. She would go through these fits. She didn't believe her mom was dead, even though she was the last person to put the needle in her arm. Okay? She wouldn't believe she was dead. She would recreate mom in other people. She would call other women mom. She would make herself be their daughter. She really believed that this was her mom, or she's going to be her mom, and I'm going to be that person's daughter. She would touch these other women like they were mom. The things that she would do when mom was alive, she would do those things with these other women. But it also got to the point where she would do those things with men as well, okay? Now, she knew that mom was dead, but the denial was so heavy, that false self was so thick, that it was very, very difficult for her to accept that reality, okay? She would also accuse other people of killing her mother. I mean, she would get into a psychotic episode and actually blamed somebody else for killing her mom. All right. And of course, because she couldn't deal with the pain, she did what a lot of young people do today. She would harm herself. And I've talked about that a little bit before. Okay. In contradistinction to the false self, we have the real self. In the Arabic language, there is a word, fala, which means to expose what is hidden. Okay? So you heard me talk about the former, who is kafara, who hides the ceiling in the ground. Well, the former was also called fala because he would uncover what was in the ground through harvesting and things of that sort. Okay? He would expose the hidden beauty of a seed. And this is why, I don't know if you've ever grown tomatoes before, but this is why at a certain point during the tomatoes development, you prick and prune the tomato. And one of the reasons why you prick and prune the tomato is to allow the smaller portion of the plant to receive nutrients so that it doesn't have to fight against the stronger branches on the plant, and that part of the plant won't die. Okay, so that's the reason why you do that. And I think it's interesting because a lot of people, if they haven't grown tomatoes, they don't know that they're supposed to do that. I found that out the hard way, and but it actually works. So there's an interesting meaning behind the word fala. Okay, in the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says, "Qad aflaha man tazakka." Those will prosper who purify themselves. The fala in the word istala refers to the opening of the doors of success. This meaning of fala also applies in the same fashion to joy. Okay, where istasla or istala gives so much joy that there can be no sorrow after receiving that joy. The Holy Quran is basically saying that only those who are pure or who purify themselves, okay, can achieve this falah. So, in other words, we have to rid ourselves of our base desires. We have to rid ourselves of that false self in order to achieve that purity, okay? In order to really uncover our inner soul and have our inner soul be connected to Allah and to everything around us, okay? The other thing to point out about the word falah is, what do we hear every time we hear somebody call the adhan? What do they say? They say, hayya falah, right? So what they are inviting you to, they say, we just kind of translate it as, success, right? But it's a kind of success. It's a success that after you reach that success, there can be no failure, okay? But in order to get to that, we have to work on pushing back against all of that stuff that we've experienced in the past that keeps us from really knowing ourselves, okay? If you open up the books of scholars and not just contemporary, personalities, like, Elijah Muhammad, people like that, if you go back, Imam Ghazali and Jawziyya and all of these people, they talked about knowing yourself and knowing yourself so that you can know Allah. Well, this is really what they were referring to, okay? It's important that, we make a connection to our authentic self through all the experiences that we have, again, so that we can really connect to Allah and so that we can have that success. And what does the success look like for our real and our authentic selves? The person who is living as a real self will create win-win situations for themselves, okay? They'll want to do things to serve all parties. They'll understand how it's possible to do it. They'll receive inner guidance that directs them on how to take actions that benefit everybody. The person who has connected to their real self, they won't sacrifice their own needs for another, but they won't step on somebody else to have their own needs met. Okay? And again, the real self is a self that is genuinely connected to Allah. Okay? We filtered out all of the nonsense, and now we see ourselves for who we are, for who we aren't, and for who we are in need of. Okay? What does the Quran say? Those who believe and work righteous deeds, from them shall we blot out all evil in them, and we shall reward them according to the best of their deeds. Okay? So you heard me say that the person who is connected to their real self and connected to Allah through that real self, they are able to fulfill the commandments of Allah without their ego, without their false self, without their past experiences and baggage getting in the way. Okay? The person operating as an authentic or real self strives always to be aware of their behavior and its impact on other people. The authentic self realizes the connection between themselves and others, and when they harm others or when they harm the universe. Okay? So this is a more holistic way of being. And this is a holistic being that a lot of people who are mired in their false self, they're not able to live it out. Okay? Why aren't they able to live it out? They are primarily concerned with eating, sleeping, copulating, defending their ego, gaining more material wealth, pleasing their low desires. Okay? And it doesn't matter if the person was abused, if they use drugs, okay, if they have developed a very narcissistic, selfish trait. It's all the same. It's about fill me up because my cup is empty. You guys remember me talking about my cup is empty, so I'm just going to pull from wherever I need to pull from to get some stuff. The problem with it is because they're living a false reality, they don't really know what they need. Okay? And that's where this part of today's lesson comes into play for ourselves and for other people. In order for us to be able to give to other people, we have to be whole. Okay? We have to be able to serve the people in a healthy way. If we're not able to serve the other people in a healthy way, then our serving them is going to be deficient to a degree. And there's no better proof than to look at if you've ever been called to the assistance of someone, you try to help them, and you realize that you don't have all of the power to do it. If you see that person later, that person will still be in need of the things that they asked you for. They'll be asking somebody different. Okay? They'll be asking somebody different. And it's a vicious cycle. Okay? I wanted to also mention, in terms of the person who is experiencing, a reality and connected to Allah, we have hadith like, a Muslim is the one from whose tongue, everybody is safe, and they're safe from his hands and things of that sort. Okay? These are very, very good ways to understand the difference between the real self and the false self. The false self. You all have heard me speak about people who commit violent crimes against other people. Okay? A lot of the people don't really have a rational explanation for why they do what they do. They were trying to get something, they didn't get what they need, they needed, they moved on to the next person. And I always like to give people the analogy of someone who commits small time burglary. And they convince themselves that they need that $200. They break into the building and they get that $200. They go pay whatever bill or do whatever they needed to do, go to the club and splurge or whatever it was. Well, when they need money next time, what are they probably going to do? They're going to do the same thing because their mind has told them, hey, look, you can do this now. So they do it again. Okay? Their self-accusing spirit, it's not active for them. Okay? For the person who's living a reality within Allah, okay, then it's active for them. Okay? So that person goes and they steal that $200 and then they get away with it. They want to do it again. They go bigger that time. They get away with it. And their mind begins to rationalize that behavior and they make it okay. And we see that happen all around us, even outside of criminality, outside of criminal behavior. Okay? The way that people dress when they come out their houses sometimes, when they dress in a lewd fashion and stuff, they have a very good, at least in their understanding, a very good rationale for what they do. Okay? So it always turns into, I am okay. All right? And it's not that they're okay. It's that they're empty. Okay? It's because they're working out of that false self. In order to get ourselves and other people to that, we have to really, really start understanding what struggle is about. And a lot of people like to use the word jihad. We have to understand that when Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam was talking about, coming back from the minor jihad to the greater jihad, he was talking about, dealing with ourselves. Okay? He was talking about dealing with ourselves. And a lot of us, we hear that, but we don't really emphasize it, and we don't really work on how to struggle against our own selves like that. Okay? The term mujahida can be used for mental, struggle and hardship, physical hardship, financial hardship. So it's very, very important that we're able to get a broad understanding of what mujahida means. Okay? When it comes to the false self now, this individual or these individuals are not just in a jihad to repel materialism from themselves. They also have to go deeper to learn why they are involved in this kind of materialism, what it is they are trying to get to. And as Muslims sitting in this room, we have to be able to pull out the tools in order to help ourselves deal with this stuff and in order to help the other people, deal with this stuff. If we're asking people to come to success, if we're asking people to come to Islam, then we have to be able to provide some very, very good tools to deal with this stuff. Okay? You heard me say last week that if you go to therapy, one of the things that you're going to be asked to do is take some serious looks at yourself. The therapist, the psychiatrist, the psychologist, the counselor is going to pose a lot of questions to you and ask you to reflect upon those things. Okay? And I always crack up when people get in touch with me because they'll be asking me for advice and I never really give them advice. I give them about 15 or 20 more questions. And they say, what should I do about? And then I'll email back 15 or 20 more questions. And then a few weeks later, they'll contact me again. Okay? Well, you know what? I figured out X, Y, Z. Good. Now can I ask you a question about this? And it goes on even more. And either the people, there are two responses. Either the person is not serious about developing and they will get frustrated with me asking the questions because they want, a quick answer, right? Or they're serious about their development. They'll go back and they do the work on themselves. They try to be introspective and they figure out some new things. They do more research. They listen, and they'll come back with some answers, and they'll be ready for the next step. Okay? So we have to also, as Muslims, trying to give this Islamic therapy to people, right? We have to be very, very cognizant of the client that's standing in front of us. Okay? Are we talking to somebody who wants a quick fix? They don't want to do any work. And if you give them a quick fix, that's just going right back to their false self, because now you're trying to satisfy their need for immediate gratification. Okay? Or are we dealing with somebody who's trying to recognize their real self and they're genuinely interested in cultivating themselves? Okay? One of the things that we always have to be talking to the people about is an understanding of the different parts of the brain. If you've taken a psychology course in college, then you probably know a little bit about, the id and the ego and Freudian psychology and things of this sort. You probably know a little bit about the squirrel brain. Does anybody know what the squirrel brain is?
Squirrel brain?
Yeah, we kind of call in addiction studies, we call it squirrel brain.
Limbic system.
Limbic system. And what is that used for primarily?
Lower-based desires.
Lower-based desires. That's right. Lower-based desires. So the squirrel brain, the limbic system, that's the system that is going to be responding firstly primarily to things like panic, okay, to a loud sound, a gunshot, okay, a door slamming, but not really knowing that it was a door slamming. It was just something that, got your heart rate going. And then the other part of your brain has to say, wait a minute, what was that? Let me figure out what it was. It wasn't something that was life-threatening, okay? Unfortunately, a lot of people are acting primarily out of that squirrel brain, okay? So if you look at it from an Islamic standpoint, we've got things like fasting, okay, that asks us to, hey, you know what? Control your squirrel brain. I know you're hungry. I know you see food right there and your mouth is watering, but you know what? Not right now. Okay? So we really do have a system as Muslims, but it's about integrating it and being patient enough, understanding that as Muslims, as healthy Muslims, we are in effect counselors, and when we're trying to do dawah and deal with people, we are dealing with clients. Okay? It's very important, after talking about the limbic system, to be able to get into the spiritual aspect of the limbic system, which is really about the nafs. Okay? It's about the three parts of the nafs. The nafs primarily is man's enemy. And while it's an enemy, it's not an enemy that you're going to get rid of completely. No. It's more like, a big animal that it's yours. You're not going to leave it, but you've got to train it. Okay? And if you don't train it, it's going to become so big that it eats you up and it eats everybody else up around you. Okay? So it is that thing that has to be really, really trained. And it's important to mention this. I mention this a lot. As I told you all before, a lot of times when I talk to people who are non-Muslims, I have to couch the language in a way that they understand without adding, religion to it, because obviously the people have got a problem with that. But I find the language that they understand, and I really like to use the squirrel brain, because when they see themselves acting like a squirrel, now it's like, oh boy, is that really me? Is that really what I'm doing? Okay, and they start to rethink things a little bit. But the nafs, has to be trained. And there are three stages. The first is nafs al-amra. Okay, and it's the worst category of the nafs. When the nafs al-amra is active, when it's active and strong within a person, this person will commit sin, they'll do wrong actions, and they will boast about it. They will feel no remorse. They will justify their behavior. Okay? So whether that is walking through Walmart and using foul language, because, we've heard it. We've all been there. Walmart, Target, wherever. Maybe Target to a lesser degree, but we've heard the people talk to their kids and use curse words and stuff like that. And they'll do it and think that it was completely normal. And I've even seen where people have walked up to them and tried to say something to the individuals, and they curse them out too. Okay? And they justify what it is that they do. This part of the nafs is, as I said, very, very animalistic. Sleeping, eating, copulating. Okay? And it is the closest ally to shaitan. All right? It is the closest ally to shaitan. If shaitan can get nafs al-amara, he's happy. Okay? He's very, very happy. So we should be praying as Muslims that we have enough strength to overcome it, and that also that we are praying for the other people who are succumbing to it, that we're not just talking about them. That we're not just critiquing their behavior, but that we're turning back to Allah and saying, Allah, please help us, help them, you help them. We have to continuously be giving this dua, okay? Because it doesn't do enough that we see this little guy walking down the street with his pants hanging down, or the other guy with the tattoos all over his face, and that we're just disgusted by them. We need to recognize that, they are a reflection. They are a reflection of a part of us, and a part of us, we are a reflection of them. Okay? The other part of the nafs is nafs al-luwama. Okay? And at this stage, the nafs has improved a bit from nafs al-amara. It feels a healthy kind of a shame. A guilt for doing wrong actions. Okay? When this part of the nafs is active, we do something and we eventually turn back to Allah and we repent. Okay? So what we want to do is try to get people who are either outside of Islam and doing wrong actions, or who are Muslim and who are doing wrong actions. We want to try to get them to understand how to get to the point of repentance. And I can tell you what my Sheikh has shared with us, believe it or not, and it sounds so simple, but again, it's dua. You're asking, even if it is you that is making the mistakes, if your nafs al-amara is active, we're trying to encourage the person. Ask Allah to get you to the point where you can even ask for forgiveness. Because I think that it's important for me to tell you today that, we have Muslims and non-Muslims who commit wrongful actions, and they're not even able to ask for forgiveness. We have Muslims who are not even able to pick up the Quran. They see it. They're not able to pick it up. They're not able even to look at it if they walk past it. I was talking to a brother a few weeks ago. There are Muslims who hear the adhan, who when they hear the adhan, they walk out. Do you remember we discussed that? They will hear the adhan and will leave the place where the adhan is being called. And remember what I said? What was the word that's in the adhan that calls us to success? Falah. What are they running away from? And why are they running away from it? We run away from things because we have what? Pain. Okay? We're running away from pain. You see? So it all kind of comes back in a circle. Okay? But when the nafs al-luwama is active, okay, this is a person who now wants to begin to do right. They want to please Allah. They want to figure out how to get there, but they may not know exactly how to do it on their own. Okay? It's important because there are varying degrees within that part of the nafs, and we all kind of go through it, because we may actually do something or say something to somebody and not realize until later on in the day or later on in the week, that what we said was offensive or that what we said was wrong. So it takes a little while for this nafs al-lawwama to start to activate. Okay, so a lot of us experience that. So when we're dealing with non-Muslims who are responding primarily to the false self, okay, we have to keep it in mind that this is a long process. And that's why I always say this isn't about social psychology. It doesn't happen overnight. There's not going to be a grand movement that gets everybody to wake up. It starts with one person at a time, okay, starting to cultivate and develop themselves with a support network, okay? That part of the nafs is definitely an improvement from the previous nafs, but we always have to be trying to improve ourselves. And the last part of the nafs is the nafs al-mutma'ina. And this is the best kind of nafs. It's been rectified with the help of Allah, and it's been trained to obey Allah. This is the nafs that not only prays the salah on time, it gives the zakah without thinking about it. It says a good word without thinking about it. It does a good deed without thinking about it. It doesn't have to remind itself that this is right. Okay? This is the completeness of the real self. Okay? This is the completeness of the real self. And now that I'm saying that to you, now you probably realize that there are very few of us who are at nafs al-mutma'ina, that we are at lu'amma, that we have to remind ourselves what is right to do. We have to remind ourselves to repent about this. And we will spend a lot of time in that. Okay? And if you remember a hadith from Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, there was some Sahaba who said, you know, that they were mu'min. And what did he say to them? He said, don't say that. Okay, and they said it again, well, mu'min, huh? And he said, don't say that. He said, say you're a Muslim, because faith has not yet entered your heart. Okay, well, this is what he was referring to. Okay, so we have to keep that in mind for ourselves, and we have to keep that in mind when we're trying to apply this kind of Islamic therapy to other people that we see out there, when we're trying to share a good word with them, that it takes a lot of development. The same way that a client will come into the addiction program and get a 6-month or an 8-month or a 12-month program, right? A treatment program, just a treatment program. I'm not talking about maintenance, just a treatment program that they have to work through. This is the same approach that we have to take with trying to apply Islamic medicine as a salve to people. Okay, so I want to stop right there because I don't want to go further, because that'll be like another hour's worth of stuff. But I wanted to give you all a very, very, very good understanding of the real self, of the false self, where the false self comes from, why people are mired down in it, why we may not be able to reach them. Okay, and from an Islamic standpoint, how to educate ourselves about the nafs so that we can then start to deal with this effectively. Okay, because these mental issues that people have, when they act out, they're going to be acting out from our Islamic understanding. They're going to be acting out primarily because of this nafs. Okay, so we have to start repelling that, and we have to ask Allah to encourage them to want to repel it, because in truth we can have all of the planning, we can have this whole treatment plan, but what does Allah say? Allah is the best of planners. You know, they plan and I plan. You understand what I'm saying? Right. Okay. So we have to keep that in mind. Okay, so I wanted to mention that really, really quick. I have a lot of other stuff, but I don't want to cover it this week, okay, because it just can be so heavy. But we want to start talking about, like I said in the beginning, how to give a proper invitation to people and how to provide a more substantial form of help to the people. So with that, I'll make the eye, and then inshallah, if you have questions, we can take those questions. So, ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار. ربنا أتمم لنا نورنا واغفر لنا إنك على كل شيء قدير. سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون وسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين.